Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. This is Lori Smith on Blog Talk Radio. It is 6 o'clock here in the morning, Thursday morning, October the 7th. I'm happy to be here. This is One Child Abuse Survivor to Another, 30-minute live internet streaming radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com, and chat room is open if anybody would like to sit in there. I did pop the link in there to the website that we'll be looking at. Still looking at anger and doing a pre-test and also a test, an anger index test, to see where, just in case, just to see how angry or hostile we really are. It's really interesting to take a look at these questions, and I hope everybody's getting something out of this. I know I am. And so I'm just drinking some coffee, waking up here, and I'm happy to be able to continue to do these shows, and thank everybody for tuning in, everybody who's listening to my shows. I really appreciate it. And I didn't realize how long I'd be doing them. It's almost a year now. In November there, it'll be a year. And I really wasn't sure how long I'd be doing these shows, so it's just awesome to have the support. Thank you so much for being here and your kind comments and for supporting me. I really appreciate it. And so we'll get right into the show. I'm not a counselor or therapist, I don't hold any certificates in those areas. I'm just a private citizen who does my own blog talk shows, and I always say this on every show because it's so important, I'm just a survivor, right, of child abuse, and I just want to be one more voice to say to people, we can get help, we can do this, and it's a daily walk, and that's why I wanted to, I wanted to do a show, at least, Monday through Friday, just to talk about survivor issues, adult survivor issues and whatnot, because there's so many of us out there, and this I know. And so, I'm just a private citizen. You have to listen at your own discretion. I'm talking about everything to do with child abuse, and everything that surrounds the whole topic of child abuse, right? So it's a very sensitive topic, and if you think the show might bother you, you have to turn the show off. Listen at your own discretion. And if you're a young person under the age of 18, I just ask that you have someone who's older, an adult, listen with you, so that they can sort of tell you whether or not they think you should be listening to it. And because I don't know how young the people are that are listening to my show. So if you're really young and you might want to have somebody listen to the show with you. A parent, if you have a parent who cares, which I hope you do. So many times we don't, but if you do, that'd be great. And or if you have a teacher, counselor at school, somebody you trust who's proven themselves trustworthy, to listen to the show with you to see if it's something that you should be listening to, right? It's very important to keep yourself safe online, right? And so we'll get right into this topic. It's from www.angerresources.com, ANGEROURCES, angerresources.com. And it's a great website. Dave Decker and Michael Obsatz have put this website together. And there's all kinds of information on here for people who might be experiencing, issues with anger management problems, or just feeling like angry all the time. There's some good information on here. And we've been looking at things like the shame-rage connection, which we looked at a few weeks ago. Right now we're working on the anger portion of it. But this is a great website, and I hope you will check it out. There's all kinds of great information on here, especially for people who are experiencing things like road rage, waiting in lines, becoming hostile. So many people experience anger. Anger is a natural response. So we all experience anger, but so many people have a hard time managing it. And I think that we all need to sort of pay attention to this, because we don't want, I know myself growing up abused, right? I didn't like to have all these angry people around me being angry at me all the time. So I don't like to put that on somebody else, right? And so we have to be responsible for our own behavior, right? And I wish everybody would check this out. And I think that, I wish my parents would have got some help with their anger management problems. That would have stopped a lot of the abuse, right? But unfortunately, they didn't. So, but we can. We don't have to be like that. We don't have to take our anger out on other people. We don't have to abuse people just because we're angry and we're hostile. That's abuse, right? When you put when you push your anger and hostility on other people, it's abuse. And I don't care what anybody says. That's fact. No, it's abusive behavior. And nobody appreciates it. Nobody likes it. But anger is a natural response. So how do we handle it? How do we get control of it? And we haven't even gotten into that. Right now we're just doing the tests, right? It says, how angry and hostile are you? This is the test, the anger index test that you can find on the website. We were looking at the questions yesterday and left off. I'll have to go back and find out where we left off. But you're supposed to score these questions like from 1 to 29, these questions 3 for often, 2 for some of the time, 1 for rarely, 0 for never. And then what you do is you add up your points, and at the end you go and see just where you fit into the scheme there of just how angry we really are, or how hostile we are, right? And so I haven't really been scoring these, as I go along. I've just been talking about them because they're really quite interesting questions. There's 29 of them. There's a few more after this one. I think there's a total of 36 questions, but we're supposed to score questions 30 through 35 or 36 a little differently. 30 to 36 are scored differently. But then you just take your numbers and find out where you fit into the scale, right? And we left on question 23, where it says, when I'm angry, other people seem to shy away from me or be afraid of me. And, we left off there. So we'll pick up on question 24. It says, I have been so mad that I grabbed or pushed another person. So we're supposed to answer that question with either a 3, which would be for often, 2 for some of the time, 1 for rarely, or 0 for never. So that's how you can do this pretest. And if you want to go to that website, www.angerresources.com /angerindex.html, you can do this little test here and work through it yourself and find out where you fit in there. It is quite interesting. We all experience anger, so this is just good information for anybody who may experience problems with dealing and how to handle their own anger issues, right? So question 24, I have been so mad that I grabbed or pushed another person. And that's true for me, sadly enough. I don't do that now, but when I was younger, in my 20s and even into my 30s, I have done that, and generally not somebody at work or whatever, but if somebody, like my niece, I did that, and, I had to apologize, and I was just sort of treating her the way that I was treated as a teenager, just being grabbed and pushed around. And so I was just, lashing out at her the way my mom lashed out at me, and, that's horrible, right? So I did apologize to her, and she's cool with it, but I never did that again. But the thing is as a child, I was always grabbing and pushing people, like little kids around, right? Little kids would come up, little tiny kids would come up to give me a hug, right? And I'd just push them down, right? I was just angry. I was just an angry child, right? They weren't doing anything to me. I was just taking my anger out on them, right? I wasn't used to having people come and run up and hug me, right? So I really didn't know how to handle it. You know what I mean? There's so many reasons behind this sort of stuff, right? But just to be that mad that you would grab and push another person is just not right. Question 25, I want to jump in and interrupt other people rather than listen when I have something important to say. So I want to jump in and interrupt other people rather than listen when I have something important to say. I sometimes do that. We have to be honest with ourselves. Otherwise, this test won't do anybody any good. Like these questions here, if we're not going to answer them honestly, then there's no sense in even doing the actual work on it. You have to be honest when you really want to get to the bottom of something, and to get the true picture, you have to look back at your own behavior and say, have I done that, or do I do that, or and I know I do that. And it's not. I don't even think I do it on purpose. It's not like, I'm more important than somebody else, or I think it's just that I get so excited that I want to get my stuff in there. I think that might be what it is. It's not something like, I don't care what other people have to say. It's more that I just want to hurry up and get my stuff in there too because I'm excited about it or whatever. But I think that for me that question would be, sometimes, right? 26, other people express concerns to me about what happens when I get angry or how often I get mad. So this would be, that's an interesting question. Other people express their concerns to me about what happens when I get angry or how often I get mad. So people pointing out to us that their concerns about us because we're always angry or we're always mad. And that's an interesting question. For that one, that would be 0 because I don't get like that anymore. I kind of, in my older years have stuffed my anger. See, that's the whole issue, right? Talk a lot about that, just pushing the anger down, once in a while exploding on somebody, which would just be horrible because they would get the whole wrath of my anger because I hadn't been angry or allowed myself to show any anger for so long. It just builds up, and then somebody does one thing that finally just pushes the last button and then just explode on them, you know what I mean? And it's a horrible way to be, right? So that's why I try not to do that now. I'm really working on that. So, just to take care of things as they happen, or do whatever I can to not stuff the anger down and actually allow myself to work through stuff. But it's hard. And we can do it, right? And question 27, I don't like how I act when I get angry, and I end up feeling bad about what I said or did. That was me when I was younger, because I was actually, I talked about that yesterday, actually all week since we've been doing these shows, because when I was younger I was angry, so I would feel bad about what I had done, or what I had said, right? And, then of course there wasn't much I could do to reconcile it, really. Once you say something and do something that's, hurtful to somebody, what are you supposed to say, right? You can apologize, mainly you just have to not do it again. My problem was I had a real hard time getting control of my behavior when I was younger. So I would feel bad about it, and even some stuff I actually still feel kind of bad about. There's no way I can go back and change it or fix it, but the thing is, it doesn't really matter, because as long as I just change my behavior now, I think that's what counts, right? And so, we can't go back sometimes and fix things, right? It's just too far back and the people are gone. But the thing is we can change the way we act and behave today, like now. And that's important, right? That's very important. It says, question 28, I think I have a thin skin and am easily affected by what others say and do. I would have to answer that as the 3, like always or whatever. I as much as people would think, well, somebody who's been abused and been through really a life of hell wouldn't have a thin skin, right? But that's the whole issue, is I am very sensitive, and that's because I do care. I didn't want to shut down to the point where I didn't care about life or people. Part of me was like that. Part of me was that's why I was contemplating suicide and contemplating, self-injuring and whatnot, because part of me was a little bit sort of, I don't know how to explain it, like didn't care about this life or this world, you know what I mean? Didn't care about myself. But the other part of me did. So there was always some part of me that was saying, no, you have to remain, human. You have to remain here. You have to remain, because I could experience love as well, right? So, and goodness and happiness, right? So a lot, as well as experiencing the other side of it. So something was always kind of pulling me to stay with it and to care, right? So I kind of am easily affected by what other people say and do. I'm trying actually to not worry so much about what other people are doing and saying. I think it's when you grow up abused like that and you're in an abusive home and it never changes, and it's just a steady barragement of abuse, it's hard to, I guess, if you almost get used to that, right? So you're always being affected by what somebody else is doing, and it's generally harmful. And then you grow up to be this adult, and you're still always waiting for somebody to do something that's going to be abusive, or, to make you feel that way again. It's almost like you're just conditioned. So then when somebody does, you notice as an adult how much it really does affect you. So what I was talking about this not too long ago, I don't know, maybe a few weeks back or a month back or whatever, but just the fact that I even at work tend to put a lot of importance on what my boss thinks of me, and I think it's because it's anybody who's in authority figures are really an issue for me, right? Because my mom, I was always trying to please my mom, right? So then, of course, with my bosses, anybody who's an authority figure, you want that acceptance. You want them to like what you're doing. It's not that I have to be their best friend. Quite often I end up being the best friend of bosses because I don't know what it is, but I sort of almost for my own safety and protection weasel my way into their heads. And it's basically so that I can, it's very psychological, right? It's just protection. It's a protection measure. So I'm trying to learn how to not do that. It doesn't mean I'm going to ignore my boss if they ask me to do something. You know what I mean? It's like then he'd be fired. But I definitely have changed the way that I at work, the way that I handle authority figures, which would be the management, the bosses, right? My problem being is I'm kind of more of a managerial type, and so I tend to get in there with management, and then a lot of people think that I'm just sort of brown-nosing, but there's many reasons for it, and one used to be for protection measures. If you could get in with the boss and you could please them and do a good job, then then maybe they wouldn't be mad at you, sort of thing, right? Well, that's sort of putting my mom in their place and saying, well, if I could get in there and please her and, you know, and do the right things and, you know, say the right things, well, maybe she wouldn't abuse me, right? So that's, I think it's very psychological why people do stuff like that. But as far as, you know, thin-skinned, you know, I don't think, I think I used to be more thin-skinned than I am now. You know, I'm starting to learn to deal with the fact that some people are going to say and do things that that obviously everyone is going to do and say things that really we have no control over. We only have control over what we do, and I started to realize that. You know, I thought, okay, I can't control what somebody else is going to do or say, right? And so I have the only thing I can control is the way I feel about myself and what I'm doing, my own behaviors, right? And so I'm not as thin-skinned as I used to be, you know, as far as like being affected by what other people say and do. So it's not that I ignore people now, but I just weigh it out, whether it's information or whether it's whatever that I need to pay attention to, and if it's not, I just let it go. Whereas before I would sort of stew on things a lot, right? Question 29, my anger has gotten me into trouble with the law. That's a good question. My anger has gotten me into trouble with the law. I would say that that's not necessarily true for me. I was in trouble with the law, but not because of my anger. But I know people that were, and you know, or didn't handle things properly, like when they were, when the law was around. You know what I mean? Like when the police officers were called or whatever. You know, this is the whole issue. Like people can get right out of control and then get in serious trouble with the law because of their anger issues, right? That was not the case for me. But I knew people who were like that, right? So, you know, anger getting you in trouble with the law. So people having to phone the police on you because of your anger issues, this type of thing, right? Anybody who's abusive is going to end up in that situation, right? At some point, you would think, right? I mean, where the police are called because of a person's anger, right? And I mean, I grew up around people like that who were angry and the police called, and I grew up with a lot of my friends, even, you know, that I was hanging around with as a teenager. Quite often the police would be called and it would get out of hand, but it wasn't me, it was their behavior, so I was sitting off on the sidelines. So it wasn't, that question really for me would be never, you know what I mean? But for some people I'm sure that it is, and I know people who it would be often, you know, or whatever, or sometimes anyway. So, but my anger has almost gotten me into trouble with the law. So that's why I was laughing, because I remember so many times where my anger could have gotten me into trouble with the law if somebody would have called the police or somebody would have, you know, called security. Because I used to be sort of a very violent person and verbally violent and looking very aggressive, and so people would I'm sure would think that, you know, I could come over the counter at them or I could start something with them, right? And I was, you know, mainly just doing what I knew how to do and what I was taught to do by my mom. My mom was very much like that, and my dad too. So they, you know, they just showed me how to behave, right? So then I just took that on as a young adult, and, you know, if I didn't like the way something was going and I was talking to somebody and they weren't doing what I wanted them to do, I'd get angry, and then, you know, I'm surprised actually that they didn't call and get the law involved, you know what I mean? Nowadays they would. You have to be really careful what you do nowadays. People, especially like in airports and things like that, they won't tolerate it, and you can be arrested and brought up on charges for, you know, public whatever, mischievous or conduct or whatever, you know, I don't know exactly what it would be brought up on, but, you know, I remember episodes in airports where I would get so irate, you know, that the security would have to come and walk me out, right? This is just crazy stuff, but this is how I used to be, right? And bosses, you know, I have told bosses off and gotten quite violent and abusive towards bosses. I'm sure that I'm actually surprised that they didn't have me escorted out of the building, you know, things like this, right? So my behavior could have gotten me into trouble with the law is what it is, and I was just always kind of one step shy of that sort of stuff, right? And my friends were actually one step over the line with that stuff. So, you know, I was always just trying to remain on the right side of the law, whereas a lot of my friends were actually on the other side of it and didn't care. But, you know, something inside of me I'd try to to really try to, I just wanted to have a good life. I was so tired of being around this dysfunction, and I thought, man, it's, something sort of always inside of me saying, no, it's up to you. You can do this, and you can go to jail, or you can behave yourself, and you know what I mean? So it's, it's things that we have to decide ourselves, what kind of a life we want to have, right? So scoring for questions 30 to 36, 0 for often, 1 for some of the time, 2 for rarely, and 3 for never. Question 30, it says, if I'm doing a project around home or at work and I start to get frustrated, I lay it aside for a while, come back to it when I'm calmed down, and I can think more clearly about how to handle it. And we'd have to score that either 0 for often, 1 for some of the time, 2 for rarely, or 3 for never. So if I'm doing a project around home or at work and I start to get frustrated, I lay it aside for a while and come back to it when I'm calmed down and can think more clearly about how to handle it. And for me, I would say that's just often, right? Because I've learned how to not get all flustered and frustrated when I'm working on something or get mad. But I used to I probably have to answer that as rarely, because I used to get very frustrated and angry about stuff if it didn't work, or if I couldn't figure it out, I'd get frustrated and then I'd get mad, right? And now I'm learning how to calm down, see, as I get older, right? But when I was younger, I was a lot like that. Question 31. When people I know are having difficult times in their lives, I try to understand what's going on for them and help them out if I can. So would that be often, some of the time, rarely, or never, right? That's how we answer these questions. And, for me, I would say for sure, at least some of the time or often, I try, you know what I mean? I know people are having a hard time in their lives, and it's so hard, and I try to be there for them because I know that they're trying to be there for me too. And I think I've always been like that. So this question just, for me, would always have been the same, throughout my life. It didn't change because I care about people, and that's the difference between, people who, I've allowed myself pretty much to keep that thin skin just because I really didn't want to get all hard-hearted towards people, right? Even though I was kind of hard-hearted towards life. So that's what I was trying to explain a little bit earlier, was that, I was kind of hard-hearted towards life and wasn't particularly happy to be here. But in the meantime, I didn't harden my heart towards people, because I care about people. And that's just maybe something that's just part of my personality. I don't know. But the thing is I've always wanted to help people if I could, and appreciate it when people help me when they can. You know what I mean? So it works both ways. And so, I've always been like that. But maybe some people aren't like that, right? Question 32. I think that most people are basically trustworthy. 0 for often, 1 for some of the time, 2 for rarely, or 3 for never, that we would never think that. For me, that question is completely turned around. I used to think that most people were basically untrustworthy, so that would be always. I would think that this question, I think that most people are basically trustworthy. I would have to answer never, 3. But now I'm changing that. So now I'm thinking that it would be almost the opposite, 0. Often, that I'm starting to think that people are basically trustworthy. So that question does apply to me totally. And, but I didn't used to be that way. I didn't used to trust anybody. And I still think that there's certain people that, you just can't trust, right? Certain people are just untrustworthy, and that's all there is to it. And there are always going to be those types, right? There's always going to be people out there that you just can't trust. But there's good people out there. So if you don't trust anyone, then you don't ever get to allow yourself to trust anyone, or even yourself. So I wanted people to trust me, and I said, hey, if I want people to trust me, then I have to be able to trust them, because it works both ways. I can't expect people to trust me and then me not trust them, right? Because it won't work that way. So you have to, in order to develop some trust, you do put yourself on the line a little bit, because you could get hurt. But in every relationship, a person can get hurt. That's a fact. So I didn't want to live behind this wall of never allowing anybody to get close, or never allowing myself to get close to anybody, because that's a sad, lonely life, man. And that's not a fun way to live at all, right? And okay, so maybe you don't get hurt, but then again, you got where's the interaction with people? Where's the fun? Where's the precious moments that life is really that make up a good life, right? These precious moments between people that, if you never opened up to them, you'd never get to experience just good stuff that, when you do run into people that you can trust, right? That's the issue. And there are people out there that are really good, and that's what I've learned as I've gotten older. And still, some people are just untrustworthy. You got to be. I always use my gut instinct, and I always go with my first instincts. And so if I feel like somebody is just completely untrustworthy, then I just definitely don't have much to do with them. And if somebody proves themselves wrong and they prove themselves untrustworthy and they don't have any kind of a reason for it and they're just that type, then I just stay away from them, right? Because I'm like, nah, I don't need that. So, I think we can learn to trust, right? Question 33, when someone criticizes me, I listen to what they say and then try to assess whether it really makes sense for me. So would that be often or some of the time? Rarely or never? That's how we answer that. So when someone criticizes me, I listen to what they say and then try to assess whether it really makes sense for me. I think that for me, that's some of the time. I wouldn't say often. I would say maybe some of the time. I have a little bit of a hard time with criticism, just growing up abused, right? Being criticized, being criticized just for being born. I mean, I was put down because I lived. My mom would be like, well, you lived, you should have died with the other two that were born before you, that were born stillborn. I mean, I heard this a lot. So it was like I was being criticized for just living and surviving, right? So, I don't take criticism very well, right? I'm always looking for people, because I was abused so tragically and horrifically, that, I want people's approval. I don't want people's criticism, you know what I mean? So when I was growing up, I had a real hard time with criticism, especially like my 20s. And then in my I take it very personal, right? And then get irate if somebody criticized me. I'd be in their face. That's the whole violent behavior thing, right? Nowadays, I handle criticism a little differently. I don't mind constructive criticism when it has something to do with that might be helpful for me, to help me to grow as a person, or to help me to grow in a job or whatever. Or even in my personal life. But man, I don't take any kind of criticism that is just absolutely ridiculous. That's what they're talking about here. Criticism that just doesn't apply for us, and it doesn't apply to the situation, and it's just somebody being critical and rude. We don't have to even pay much attention to that. So that's the question. Like, when someone criticizes me, I listen to what they say and then try to assess whether it really makes sense for me. I would say that for me, that's some of the time now. I don't spend as much time fussing over it if it's something I don't think even applies to my situation. Somebody's just being critical, well, whatever. But if it's constructive and it's worth listening to, I mean, I generally try to incorporate it into my life if I can, and if it seems to make sense for me, right? And I try to be, open-minded. So that's the whole issue, right? But I didn't used to be that way, so that's the thing, right? I have changed on a lot over the years. Question 34, I try to focus on the good things that I have going in my life. And for me, I mean, that's always, right? I mean, that's often, I'm always trying to focus on the good things that I have going on in my life. And I think that's one of the reasons why, what makes me a little bit different than somebody else maybe. My mom could never focus on the good things in her life, right? I used to try to tell her, your children, you should love your children. I'd be trying to convince her that she should love her children, and she just couldn't do it, and I'd be like working on her all the time. I'd be like, come on, your children love you, Mom, your children love you. She'd be still sitting there thinking that she should kill herself. Oh, I'll just kill myself, this life is horrible. And I'd be like, oh, your children love you, Mom, they don't want you to kill yourself. We don't want you to kill yourself, I mean, and she'd be like, oh, it doesn't matter, so she didn't want, she was just miserable. And, she popped out, what would have been 10 children, right? But three were born, stillborn. So there would have been 10 of us, you know what I mean? Bad enough she was abused 7 of us, you know what I mean? But this is how horrible people are. They just never focus on the good things, and so therefore they're just no fun to be around, and because they're just misery guts all the time. And, hey, I've been through hell, and I can still laugh and have a good time. And I look at the good things in life. I look at the small stuff. The small things are what's important to me. It's not the big stuff. I don't care about the big stuff. It's these little things that really matter to me. And so, that's why it's easy to please me, because I'm not looking for the big stuff. I love the little stuff. And so, I'm an easy person to please, so even for myself. So that's the whole issue. It's like we are very much directly responsible for what we're going to get out of this life. As adults, it's our choice, right? So make the right choice. And, you do count. You do matter. and you just need to get some help. If you're suffering with this and alone, make sure you reach out. Get, whether it's group support, online group support, or counselor, therapist, a friend. Just make sure that you do reach out and get some help, right, with whatever issues that are holding you back from having a decent life that you really so deserved, right? I mean, I'm talking to abuse survivors. I'm talking to child abuse survivors mainly. You did not deserve that. Neither did I. And it's totally up to us how we're going to move forward in this healing journey. It's totally up to us how we're going to move forward in this life and what kind of life we're going to have. It's our choice, right? So have a great day, everybody, and we'll talk to you real soon. I'll be back on tomorrow morning with one child abuse survivor again, one child abuse survivor to another. Same topic, really. We'll finish this off, and then we'll move through some of the anger stuff. So thanks, everybody, for being here, and have a great day. If you need something, get a hold of me on Blog Talk Radio or Facebook, whatnot. I'll be around tonight. And talk to you soon. Bye-bye.